feel you got to be self-reliant. Like, got really bad at times. And again, it was raining, and then the rain turned to snow, and then we were on ice and post-holing through the snow into freezing water underneath and stuff. And a lot of self-reliance in there. And it was a spectacular experience, but that one took me 34 hours.
Woo!
Hi.
How you doing?
We gotta come up with a better...
How you doing, people?
We gotta come up with a better intro. What's happening?
What's happening with GottaRunRacing?
This week we got first looks at our Fiddle 50 medal. The race in Shelburne at Fiddle Park coming up in first weekend of June.
That is the 1K closed loop.
Yeah.
You just keep going round and round, round and round, round and round.
So the race is called Fiddle 50. What do you think the medal is?
A fiddler?
A fiddle!
A fiddle, yes.
Yeah. Pretty groovy.
Yeah, and you can do 25, 50 mile, 100 mile, 100K, whatever. Just keep going around.
And you can do it as a relay, too, which will be more fun to share the miles with friends.
Got it.
Check it out.
At GottaRunRacing.com.
All right.
And who is on the podcast today?
Well, it's our continuation of Canadian Trail to Western States with Steve Day.
Steve Day. 5 tickets.
No.
Oh, sorry. 5 years, 16 tickets. That's right. 5 tickets. Yeah. 5 years, 16 tickets.
5 years, 16 tickets.
And he finally got in, and I can't wait to ask him some certain questions about Black Canyon because he went there 3 times. So what's the difference of each Black Canyon? And of course he did other ones like Bighorn and Tunnel Hill. So
couple hard 100-milers.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear all about that.
And he's an Ontario boy who's transplanted to BC. Lucky guy.
Lucky guy. So all that coming up and more. Steve Day.
Welcome, Steve Day, to the podcast. It took you...
Thanks to you guys.
It took 5 years with 16 tickets. Is that right? To get into Western States?
Yeah, got in this year with 16 tickets.
Wow, that's going to be quite the journey. But first, we'd like to go back to the beginning and tell us how you even started or why you even started running.
Yeah, thanks. I'm from Ontario. I live in BC now, but I'm from Brantford, Ontario, which is the home of Wayne Gretzky. So obviously I played hockey for 15 years of my life. That's all I did. I was not a runner. I did not run track or cross country or anything. I played amateur hockey and not that well. And then went to university and, graduated and got a job and just kind of got caught in like regular life stuff. And didn't start running until my mid-20s. Actually, my wife and I were living downtown Toronto before we had kids. Actually, in Toronto, not downtown. But before we had kids and just had a lot of time on our hands and started running. And that's when we trained for our first marathon, which was 2004. And ever since then, I've been a runner in various capacities.
So you did a marathon in Toronto. And why the shift from the marathon to the triathlon while you were here?
So I was running a lot on the road. Went to the running room, picked up a book there by John Stanton and did the 20-week marathon program from that book and ran the Toronto Waterfront Marathon in 2004 and did well. My goal was to go to sub 4 and I, squeaked by in like 3:58. And so was happy with that. But wasn't obsessed with the sport at all. I think I did 1 half marathon a year and then did 1 more road marathon after that. But then friends and my wife started doing triathlons and I thought, hey, that's pretty interesting. I used to do a little bit of swimming and a little bit of biking and let's just try this out. So that turned into 5 years of my life, really, from 2000 I guess, to 2014 with triathlon, and the full obsession up to the half Ironman and then Ironman distance. And it was cool. It was cool to mix it up. But, the reason why we're talking now is because in 2014, when I did my full Ironman, which went well, and I've only done one, I finished it and was like, you know what? I don't really love the swimming and the biking. I love
That sounds familiar.
Ever since then, that's 7.5 years ago, I've been like, I love running, and there's other things I love too, like skiing, but I don't want to do triathlon anymore. I want to run on mountain single track is what I love.
I assume then once you got out to BC that you probably just naturally switched to trails.
Yeah, I did. I did one ultra in Ontario before I moved. I ran Sulphur Springs in 2015, I guess. Yeah, 2015. And I did the 50 miler because I was thinking of doing a 50K, but then I thought, why ease into it? Just do the 50 mile. It was 4 loops of the course. It was a fantastic experience. It's a nice 20K loop course times 4, really well supported. And so I did that in Ontario, and then a couple months later moved out to North Vancouver, BC. And so I was already a trail runner by that point. But the first 6 months out here just kicked my butt. The amount of vertical on every single run is just staggering. So I was a trail runner when I came out here, but it took me quite a while to acclimate.
I bet.
When was Sulphur Spring? What year was that?
2015. I ran that.
Wow. So then you went on to run rim to rim solo the very next year. Is that right?
Yeah. So I did Black Canyon in early 2016, which we'll probably talk about this a bit. I kind of developed and never kept an obsession with that awesome race in Arizona, the Black Canyon 100K race that Jamil Curry puts on. And so I ran that early 2016, and that was my first 100K and my first Western States lottery qualifier, which was a really cool experience. And then, to answer your question, I did rim to rim in the Grand Canyon later that year, I think in November.
Okay, cool.
What's the actual distance of the rim to rim to rim? At least the one that you did. I know there's different iterations of it.
So I did the classic route, which starts on the south rim. You drop to the river, traverse the floor, back to the north rim, and then reverse your track. Okay. And I think that's 67, 68 kilometers, about that, if memory serves me correct. And I don't know the metric gain, but I think it's around 13,000 feet of climbing. Based on, you got 2 major climbs, a 5,000 foot wall, a 6,000 foot wall, and then the valley floor, which slopes up from south to north. So it's a spectacular adventure.
And how was it? Did you love it?
It was great. It was great. I did it in 2016 by myself, and then I did it again with a friend a few years later. Kind of undertrained the second time, but I think every adventurer or ultra runner should spend some time in the Grand Canyon.
But you did Black Canyon before rim to rim, so was Western States on your radar before Black Canyon?
Oh yeah. As soon as I finished Sulphur Springs, actually probably before I ran Sulphur Springs, I quickly started obsessing with ultra running. And the first book I read was Relentless Forward Progress by Brian Powell, and from Iron Far. And that book's, I think, written in 2011. It's pretty old, but I read it and just opened my mind to the craziness of ultra running, like that people do these 100-mile plus races. And then from there, I'm a big reader. I read Ultramarathon Man by Dean Karnazes and Eat and Run by Jurek, and obviously Born to Run and everything.
Obviously.
If you haven't read Born to Run, you shouldn't even be here, right?
It's basically our Bible.
But, Ultramarathon Man, like the middle third of that book is basically just a race report of his first Western States, and it's spectacular. Yeah. And so I read that book 20 times. And so that's my obsession with states. That's where it comes from.
Dean has a gift, I think. He's so inspiring and so humble, and just listening to him, and he acknowledges when he fails too, which is really awesome, because if you look at him from afar, you think he is naturally gifted and he does very well, but at the same time, he's the first one to admit his struggles, which I think is really good, because You don't want to think that people are out there being superheroes and that it's not something that you're able to try. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
We were.
Yeah, I met him in 2018 at Western States, and he's got this wicked belt buckle that just says 1,000 miles, 10 days. On it. Coolest thing I've seen.
So the first time at Black Canyon, that was going to be your first ticket race. How did that go? Your very first time running Black Canyon?
It was an interesting experience, as I think probably anyone would say, going up to that distance, 100K and beyond, because I went into it in pretty good shape, actually really good shape, fully self-coached, just reading books and, taking what I learned from road running and triathlon training and kind of putting that into practice for the training for ultra, and did a really good, serious, block of probably 20 to 24 weeks leading up to Black Canyon. So it was ready for the race, had no idea what I was getting into. And on paper, Black Canyon looks like a very easy 100K. It's a net downhill course. It's nice and dry in the desert. It's in February, so it shouldn't be that hot, and it looks like it should be runnable. But after 3 times, I can tell you it's a very deceptive course. So I ran the race. There were some huge big name athletes like Sage Canada that were running it that same year. And I finished and was humbled and learned a lot and set my 100K PR at the time, because it was my only one. I think I finished 15:52. And Sage finished to the minute 8 hours faster than me. He was in 7:52 and I was 52. I'll never forget those times. So
a whole work day.
Exactly. 8 hours.
It's crazy how fast those guys can go. Do you have to finish Black Canyon under a certain time to get a ticket?
Yeah. The race cutoff is 20 hours,
Okay.
but there's certain states cutoff of 17 hours. And so I knew at, whatever point, like 75K, I knew I was going to get under the 17-hour point. And so I was running as much as I could, but there was a lot of shuffling, a lot of kind of walking and jogging going in the final 25K. I'd never gone over that distance. And, quite frankly, in hindsight, my legs just weren't trained for that distance.
Right. And in 17, you did Canyons again as your second qualifier, correct?
Yep.
Oh, so what did you take from the second time Black Canyon? Did you able to improve in the first time?
Yeah. So this was like 2017, and now this time I knew what I was getting in for. Right? And about 10 days before the race, Jamil Curry was sending out daily updates to all the registered racers that they were having monstrous, like rainstorms, like unprecedented January, February rains in the desert. And it's a 100-kilometer point-to-point race, and you run through multiple rivers because you go in and out of this Black Canyon, and there's a river that goes down it. And the rivers were flooded like 5 foot high, so there was no. He could run the race as is. So Jamil ended up changing it. So instead of 100K point to point, it was a 50K and then out and back. But it was still like the rains were horrific, and all of the nice desert, hard, dirt and sand turned to mud. So it was, to answer your question, I was definitely better trained going into that race, but the conditions were really harsh. And so I still finished sub 17. I think it was like 16:20 in that year, but like I had for sure hypothermia and like out of body experiences, nasty conditions. So got it done. It wasn't pretty, but that was my second ticket race.
And then later that year, you attempted.
I'm sorry, I another question. So then you must be getting worried there. You're getting pretty close to cutoff for the Western ticket. You're 40 minutes away. Were you getting worried?
I'm pretty good at doing math in my head, right? And so, which kind of came in handy in Bighorn a couple of years later. But no, I was never worried. Like, you're like shin deep in icy cold water and mud, and kind of got the GPS watch on, so you know how fast you're moving, whatever the kilometer minute splits were. I can't remember, but by about kilometer 75, I was like, okay, as long as I keep moving at this pace, I'm going to finish, right? And so that was reassuring. I remember pulling into like the kilometer 94 aid station, and it was just chaos. Like there were so many people, that was just a mess. And the guys at the aid station were putting garbage bags over everyone's head, like cutting holes in the garbage bags, putting them over our head,
Wow.
and go and sending us out for the final 6K just to get to the finish line. And so we all finished wearing garbage bags. It was nuts.
I'd like to see that picture. So later that year, you went for your third qualifier and your first 100-miler at Tunnel Hill, correct?
Yes.
So how did you feel leading into upping the ante to that extra 60K?
And what made you pick this race?
Mm-hmm.
Tunnel Hill. Yeah. And I've listened to a few of your podcasts, and I know you've had, a bunch of other athletes on that have raced Tunnel Hill. And so 2017 was the year I did it. Yeah, that was the year that Camille Herron was there and set the 100-mile trail world record, which was absolutely spectacular to be there for her, or, to witness that, even though I was, again, more than 8 hours behind her, obviously. But I really wanted to do a 100-miler. I didn't want to eventually get into states with just these 100-kilometer qualifiers, right? Like, I remember the first time I ran Black Canyon, there was this woman that I was running with, and she kind of asked, just out of random, like, if you get in with one ticket, are you going to run states? And I said, yeah, of course I am. And then she said, but that'll be your first 100-miler, which, when she said that, was like terrifying for me. Now, Ellie Greenwood, I believe, Western States was her first 100-miler, and she won it. But despite the fact that we live in the same town, I know Ellie Greenwood. So I wanted to run a 100-miler. There was another reason why I wanted to free up my 2018, and so I doubled up on my Western States qualifiers in 2017. So I did the early one in February, and then Tunnel Hill, to answer your question, Norm, is in November, and it's after the Western States year ticks over to the next. And so by doubling up in 1 year, I not only got to do a 100-miler, which was a spectacular experience, but I also freed up 2018 for adventure and didn't do a qualifier the final year. So, yeah, Tunnel Hill was an interesting experience. I think I ran a fantastic 75 miles, which is great because that's than 100K, and an absolute train wreck for the final 25 miles. But I finished under 28 hours, and again, got my third ticket in the Western States, and so it was a good learning experience.
So describe the wall. What exactly happened?
Is that when Camilla Herron passed you again for the fifth time?
No, she was long done, right? She was done and drinking beer somewhere. Probably the only time in my life, that I considered DNFing was at mile 75 of that. And it was just knowing what I had ahead of me. I wasn't mile 95, I was mile 75. I luckily kept going, and, the final 25 miles were hell, but, got through it and finished and got the ticket and learned a lot and, put those learnings into practice. And so every other 100-miler I've done since then, I think I ran a heck of a lot better trained than that first one at Tunnel Hill.
Tunnel Hill, is that relatively flat?
It's a 25-mile long rail trail that I believe is at a 2% grade from whatever, north to south or south to north. And so it's kind of a constant 2% grade. And then you turn around and do kind of the opposite downhill. And 2% doesn't sound like a lot, especially when you can run single track out here up to 15, 25, 30 percent grade. But after 20 plus miles of that 2% grade without changing, it was tough on my legs. I wasn't conditioned for it, and I think I only trained 11 weeks for that one. And I went to that race knowing that it was about getting my ticket and freeing up my 2018 for adventure. So I accomplished what I wanted to, even though it wasn't pretty.
Interesting.
Do you have any aspirations to do UTMB? You're living in the right place to train for it, it sounds like. Yeah,
I do. The Western States journey to get in took so long, and I don't have a lot of patience for the lotteries. So I don't really. I would love to run UTMB. or CCC or TDS or one of those events. I have a friend running TDS this year, and I had another friend a couple of years ago that ran OCC, the 56-kilometer version, and someone else that ran CCC, and I'll say they're spectacular events, but I don't have the desire or the patience to deal with the lottery system to get into that. No.
So let's move on to ticket number 4, which is
BigHorn.
Yeah.
Have you ran BigHorn?
No, but it sounds so big
and hard.
Oh my God, that was a hard one. So big group of us from Vancouver, like 15 of us, went down for this event. It's in Wyoming, BigHorn, and we all drove down from Vancouver, like a 17-hour drive, and it's in the middle of the mountains, middle of nowhere. Right? It's such a wild experience. And you read about people like AJW that have ran the race multiple times, and I can't imagine going back to BigHorn like after what we went through. And it'd be easy to say, oh, it was a bad year, but it wasn't a bad year. That's BigHorn. It's like that every June, and it's 100 miles. And there's a reason why it's a hard rock qualifier, which I learned. It's 50 miles out, and then you come back. And it's a spectacular course. Nothing bad to say, but it's the best race I've ever done in my life. Just the views and the people, and I've never been to Hard Rock or anything, but really, you got to be self-reliant. Like, got really bad at times. And again, it was raining, and then the rain turned to snow, and then we were on ice and post-holing through the snow into freezing water underneath and stuff, and a lot of self-reliance in there. And it was a spectacular experience, but that one took me 34 hours.
Ooh.
I think the cutoff was 36-ish, and I came in 34:47, I think was my finish time on BigHorn. But it was amazing. And I think I learned more from that day and a half about myself and the ultra athlete I want to become than any other time in my 45 years.
Wow.
Mentally, what were you thinking? Like, were you thinking when you were doing so many climbs, were you thinking, what am I doing? Did you ever think of quitting this thing?
I mentioned that before with Tunnel Hill, when I did think about quitting at mile 75, which I had a hotel, and I knew there was a warm bed, and I thought about that at Tunnel Hill. And then I learned after Tunnel Hill that you always check out of your hotel the morning of your 100 miles.
Whoa.
That's a good tip.
That is clever.
And I taught myself this, and it's not just to save $100. It's because you can't have an escape in your mind, right? And so at BigHorn, not once in 34 hours did I ever think about quitting.
Nice.
Like it was hard, and we were climbing ourselves up like walls of mud and like sliding down icy slopes, but I was liking or loving every minute of it.
Who paces you during these 100-milers? Is it your wife or
no? Up to this point, I've never had a pacer. And I'll get to the backyard ultra that I did 2 years ago in 2020, which was the first time I had a pacer in 100K or 100 miler. But I've never had one up to this point. I always ran Black Canyon by myself. It's very, very like easy with drop bags and stuff like that. Plus, I kind of like being by myself. But for states, I'm definitely employing a pacer strat.
It's kind of a prerequisite if you want to stay friends with your ultra friends. You got to pick at least one to take to Western. You mentioned actually that you were at Western, I think in 2018. Was that to crew for someone or?
No, so so thanks for bringing that up. 2018, my son and I, who's now 14, so he would have been like 10 at the time, went down to States to spectate. That was the year that Walmsley had done at that point. He had his one, blow up, and then the DNF, and he hadn't won. And then Walmsley ran like Sonoma that year and just annihilated the course in May. And after he ran Sonoma, I said, I want to go to States because I feel like this is just going to be history in the making. And so my 10-year-old son was just like, let's go. So we flew down to States to spectate the race and got in touch with Brian Powell from iRunFar and said, we're happy to help and volunteer for your race coverage, which was really cool. So we worked a bit with iRunFar at the race, just kind of, cataloging runners as they came in and taking their times down. But we got to really, be in Olympic Valley, see the escarpment, go to Robinson Flat, go to Forest Hill, and we watched flying through Forest Hill, and then Francois coming flying through.
Oh, yeah.
Chasing Jim. And then we were down at the river at mile 80 when Jim crossed the river, and then at the finish line on the track in Auburn when Jim finally finished and broke the course record. It was such an amazing experience to be there for that. So I've never ran like a step of the Western States course. I am going to training camp in May, but it's really cool that I was there in 2018 because I got to experience what it's like, at least from like the Walmsley perspective.
That's really cool.
Did you ever watch the lottery? Because now you have 4 tickets at this point. Did you ever watch the lottery every year to see where you are?
I had never watched the lottery, so I did actually coincidentally, watch it this past year when my name was actually drawn, but I never watched it. I just would always be, normally doing something, running or skiing or, scrambling somewhere, and then would either check my phone and see that there's no text saying, hey, you got to do state, or I just do a search on the list afterwards and find out. So I had never watched it until this year.
Well, that was a good year to choose.
Yeah, you chose a good year.
Yeah.
And then your final time at Black Canyon, was there any different experience in 2020 that you'd like to share, or was it similar?
Please tell me that was the perfect Black Canyon race that you had. Let's do it.
Okay, so the day before I would have said this is it. I think I even put out on Strava with my final run, 48 hours before. This is it. I'm taking 3 hours off my 100K PR. That was my goal. It's February of 2020. So literally COVID was just starting to hit the fan, but nothing had locked down yet. And so I was lucky because I got my qualifier in February, the month before everything shut down.
Right.
And I ran Black Canyon 100K. I went in at the time what I thought was extremely well trained. I was heat adapted. I had done 12 days straight in the sauna. I didn't sweat anymore. I thought quads were bulletproof and my stomach was bulletproof. And I went out hard. And I don't regret going out like that because never in my ultra running life or Ironman or even road running had I gone out with that sense of drive, right? I ran the first 30K in 3 hours. I ran the first 50K and I think under 6 hours. And I wasn't regretting it. I was I'm going sub 13 and I'm flirting with 12 at this point. But by about 60K, it started to fall apart. The legs were not conditioned to run a 6 hour 50K, right? On a net downhill kind of technical rocky course. And my head was in it and I kept trying to rally back, right? I'm I can rally, I can eat, right? I grabbed 4 caffeinated goos and just say I'm going to rally through this, right? Head was there and I was getting my stomach back on board, but my left and right leg were just saying, no, you've burnt too many matches. So no, Norm, I didn't have perfect. I have to go back again. Finished. I did set 100K PR. It was not nowhere near sub 13 that I wanted, but I got my lottery ticket, number 5, and being a lucky ticket.
But isn't Black Canyon the second half harder than the first half?
It is. And I always forget that. It's so soul crushing. The final 40, it's so hard.
As an ultra runner, you don't start racing until the back half.
I know. Looking at my splits afterwards and my first 3 kilometers, I split a 15 minute kilometer pace. I'm what am I doing here? This is a high race. So, but all good. I didn't have a coach to tell me not to do dumb things at that time.
I was just going to ask you, what did the coach have to say about that? But you just answered the question. So when did you hire the coach?
The next day?
No, that would have been the smart thing to do. No, I hired a coach the day after my Western States ticket got picked. I'm like, holy, I did not think I was going to get picked, which is why I say I never watched the lottery. I've got, so many other hobbies. I'm normally out skiing. When's the lottery? Early December? Like I'm normally out skiing. I was actually with my son up in Whistler. He competes in biathlon, and I was up there at the biathlon center, and he was out, getting ready to ski and shoot with the rifles, and I was literally in the car just, watching bits of the lottery on my phone, just literally on Facebook in the parking lot when my name was drawn, and planning on skiing like literally 120 days this winter. That was the plan. And so I was like, holy crap, like I can't believe with 17% chance of getting in, I did not expect to get in. And so that's when it's like, I need to have a plan and I need to have a coach like now.
So who did you hire?
I hired Kat Drew. I know on your Kat's before. Kat's spectacular. She lives in North Vancouver with me. And I wanted my two criteria for a coach, because there's lots of coaches, right? Like, Ellie Greenwood lives in North Vancouver as well, and she's still the course record holder on States. But I wanted a coach that was local to my kind of Vancouver area, that knows the trail system and can say, run this trail and don't run that trail. And I want a coach that has had success at Western States and near the course. And Kat's ran States twice. She top 10 in 2019, I believe. Very successful year, and then she ran it last year as well. And she's fantastic. So literally, we started working together December 13th, which was a couple of days after the lottery, and I've been on a very strict 100-mile training plan leading up to States, and things are going really well so far.
Can you guys run together? Are you guys living that close or no?
We live extremely close, but no, we don't run together. We both have jobs and running schedules and this and that. So
now there was something in your bio that neither one of us had heard about before, and we're really curious about it, especially because it sounds like it's now a family affair, the Bagger Challenge. Can you describe that to us?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And for those watching a video, you can see a map behind me, which is a map of the North Shore Mountains in Vancouver, or the greater Vancouver area. And there's just mountains everywhere out here. And so like I came out here as a trail runner, and then I discovered scrambling, and then I discovered obsessive peak bagging, which is just getting to the tops of mountains. And there's this challenge which just started around 12 years ago out in the greater Vancouver area, which was just a loosely collected group of ultra runners that said, let's see how many of us can tag every single summit within this geographic area. And depending on the year and the classification, they're somewhere between 75 and 87 summits in the area. Yes, some of which are easy runs or hikes up, and others are like class 3 scrambles through chimneys and kind of technical chutes that you have to do as well. Wow. And so I started doing that kind of just as a hobby on the side. When after my races, I would keep running, but I would be doing that vertical, and that's like 2 to 2,500 meter vertical days as well when you're out there for 10-12 hours, kind of tagging summits and then coming home. So it's a really cool way to just experience the mountains and just kind of see as much as you can see. And then it becomes the obsession that everything else becomes, that says, well, there's a list, and these are the mountains on the list, and let's see if I can get to all of them, right? And so I think it was in 2019 I finished all of them, which meant I got to every summit within the geographical range of the challenge. And then my son, who is now 14, so he would have been like 12 at the time, which is crazy, ended up finishing in summer of 2020. So he was the youngest person by like 15 years to ever.
Wow.
Nice.
And so he climbed with me every single one of these summits. And then my wife, who was actually recovering from ACL surgery, ended up doing this last year as her challenge, coming back from surgery. She wanted to get out in the mountains like we did and literally climb every single one of them. So it's a really cool way just to experience the outdoors. And you can do it running like I do, or you can do it hiking, and you can do it any way that you want. There's no rules on it.
How many square kilometers are we talking? 75 summits. I'm trying to imagine how many summits are within an area.
Yeah, like I can look out my window and see a dozen.
Okay.
You know, so
You bastard! I'm going to curse you all the way up the ski hill at Western.
Come on and visit, Mom.
Boy.
Oh my gosh.
What do you do?
So envious.
What do you do?
Well, that's amazing. All right. Well, this has been awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
for joining us.
Thanks, guys. It was fun. Looking forward to it.
We really enjoyed your journey. Now I know not to go to Bighorn. Thank you.
Sorry, what did you say?
You should still go. It's
It does look beautiful. All
right, then.
Thanks, Steve.
nice to meet you.
Nice to
Right.
meet you too.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye.
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 There you have Steve Day. Basically, can look out his window and see 12 peaks.
Lucky son of a gun.
Oh boy. What do you do?
I love talking to former triathletes too. It's
Yeah.
always so interesting.
Well, his Ironman was one and done.
One and done.
And then he found some trails nearby and said, hey, this is it for me. But I liked how I got my questions answered about Black Canyon.
Mm-hmm.
He, his first one was the best one, I guess.
And he's still got some. He's got a bone to pick, so he'll be back, I think.
Yes.
Don't you?
Well, now that he has a Cat Drew as a coach,
Yeah.
she can tell him, this is what you're supposed to do, see? This is what you're supposed to do, see? And I can't wait to meet him, hopefully at the Western States training camp and on race day.
Absolutely.
And that was Steve Day. Until next time, stay tuned. Cheers.